All right, and there's the magic eyeball. And here we are for a Monday edition of Dualistic Unity Raw. I love how I introduce it like that, like Monday fucking matters at all, because I wake up and I don't think about the day until I have to go and look at the schedule to see if I'm meeting anybody that morning. So, I mean, that's really the only reason that we call it a Monday. Just wanted to mention that quickly. We do have a couple of announcements. The first one is that we have one ticket left for our Vermont retreat. If you are not coming to the Vermont retreat already and you have the time to do so, I would highly recommend that you join us in Vermont. It's August 24th to 28th. We're staying at this very woodsy cabin. There's a pool table, there's a pinball machine, pond out back, some benches. It's going to be lovely. There's a hot tub. It's basically just a chance to chat with Andrew and I ongoing without a mute button in between us, without there being the interruptions of the world for 4 whole days. So I definitely recommend it. All of our retreats have been a blast. We have another one coming up this Thursday. So I'm actually going to be hanging out with Andrew in person this Thursday until just right after the weekend. And then we'll be back here next week. Do join us for our free weekly group, dualisticunity.com. You can join us on Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. That's the other announcement. Two more. Let's just say two more. We are still looking for advertising sales reps. If you would like to help us build resources for the community and you'd like to help us sell some of the advertising space that exists on the 250 plus episodes that currently are part of Dualistic Unity, we would love your help. If that is something that you have experience in, you have ideas for how we might be able to do that better, that's great too. You can find out more on our LinkedIn page. I'm going to throw up the QR code here. Follow us on LinkedIn. We do appreciate the support that way as well. And you will find more information about the job. Oh, I actually have a link to the job itself. I'll just put that there. Bam. So you can work with us. We actually have quite a few people who have joined our team recently. I think we have about 5 people who are going to be joining us, and they all bring different levels of skill and experience to the table. And so we're very, very grateful because, of course, this is a commission only job, which means a lot of things. It means that you get all of the freedom that you would like to sell this as creatively as you can within certain limits, of course. But if you know the podcast and you know the audience, then this is something that you might want to do. Just throwing that out there. The last thing, of course, is that we have the Netherlands retreat coming up. We haven't been talking about it much recently, but November 11th to 19th in the Netherlands is going to be the largest Dualistic Unity community event ever. I'm very excited about this. It's going to be dope.
I'm very, very excited. And especially after I don't know, my last week, I'm more excited for the retreats. Not that haven't always been very excited for the retreats coming up, but I always had, that fucking intention behind things that I did. And there's a pressure that comes with thinking there's a right way to do it outside of you. Like there's a way to fucking get someone else to realize something. The illusion that there is heavy. It's absurd, and realizing it just comes down to you doing it yourself, like you taking this in, you seeing this, you relaxing. Like that's all it comes down to. There's very little pressure in that in the same sense. It's not the weight of the world in the sense of needing to convince anyone. And so in regards to the retreats, I mean, I know I'm going to feel a lot different going into them because there was almost like in previous ones, and not always, it would just come up here and there, like this pull to do the right thing or say the right thing or act the right way, or like, fuck, how the fuck does a fucking retreat host act? Like how do I do this, trying to play a part as opposed to just being myself, relaxed, seeing myself, interacting with myself, and that being it. Like when that's it, everything comes from that. Everything's an expression of that mentality. That's the priority, everything just falls into line because there isn't this idea of like getting to an idea, a conceptual idea that's just like fucking blocking you off from the reality that's happening in front of you, that you are. the situation that you are, not just the situation that you're in, but the situation that you are, that you're not sensitive to. You're not seeing reality. When you're relaxed, when you're doing it for you, when you're in your spot, not trying to be anything, it's like that's where you see reality. That's where you see things playing out. You are looking at something else when you are caught up in trying to be something or convince someone or get something across to someone in a specific way. But wherever you're at, like, whatever degree of pain that you're in, it's not about, the picture of relaxing, being on the couch, like laying back. It's just not a concern, not a desire for things to be different. The recognition that, there's nothing you have to say or do in any way that'll change anything for anyone else but you. And doing it for you, relaxing in yourself wherever you're at, is going to inevitably have the most impact on everything. Because anything else, any intent, any desire for yourself to be in a different spot, for someone else to be in a different spot, is stressed, is tense. There's a tension there, and that tension is the wall between you and what's actually happening. And so the best thing you can do is let go of that need to convince anyone else. Let go of the idea of anyone else, period. But yeah, so anyway, retreats, fucking pumped for those. It's going to be a much different experience for myself. I can guarantee that, and they're going to be a blast.
And that really is the whole point, right? And it's interesting because we've said this before, and I believe Rayner actually said it in the most recent episode entitled "The Benefits." Definitely go and check that episode out. It's fantastic. I really enjoyed it. Was just that you and I don't typically play like the host role at the retreat. It's very much that we're in it with everyone else. Everything's very much a collective kind of effort in terms of just how things work out. It really is an exercise in community in itself. And so the more you can get out of the way, the less you're trying to sway anything, the more organic that community is, the more, in fact, everybody's able to align with one another, which is why it's so important to just let go. But I think you give yourself too little credit. I would like to say that at the last retreats that we've been at, you have done a fantastic job of letting go. And it's just interesting that as we go along, we start to appreciate more and more what that means. And so it's just that our capacity to let go increases over time because our appreciation and our recognition of what it means to let go increases over time. And so we're always letting go as fully as we can, more or less. But that leads to more. We make that mistake. We're like, oh, it's always the same experience of letting go. It's like, no, it's a deepening experience. And the more you do it, the more it deepens, and the more your perspective on everything changes. Because it becomes not just an option in the moment, but an actual trajectory in your life. In the same way that stress is its own trajectory. You can get more and more and more stress throughout a day and then not realize the next morning when you start over, you're still carrying some of that stuff with you. And if you do it again, now you've got 2 days stress that you're carrying on day 3. So imagine what happens over years and years and years. And it all piles up, and we recognize this. This is why we go and we look for modalities, like massage therapy and reflexology and stuff like that. Like, we're trying to help our body untangle all that stress. We're trying to help ourselves in terms of letting go of the physical consequence to holding on to that stress. But we're not addressing the stress that's underneath. Because as you said, relaxation is more than just the body.
Yeah, and they go hand in hand, right? Like the mental, the physical, there's no division between those. I was thinking like, oh, does the mental relaxation impact the physical relaxation? It's like, well, both and either. They inform each other always. But I do see it kind of as a product similar to, skin health. People are always putting the fucking topical shit on, like the exterior, doing the creams and all that shit. And it's like that stuff's coming from you, like it's coming from within, coming from being impacted by, your health, your mentality, how much stress you're holding on to. And I think there's a lot of physical kind of what's the word, like shows or tells of where you're at mentally. And then, the physical can then, when you start noticing it, then maybe you're getting stressed out about the physical. And then it just is a fucking vicious cycle. But I think there's a lot of things that are kind of shown to us in different ways. And we don't see the interconnectivity of everything. We don't see the impacts of everything that we're holding on to or being willing to let go, the impacts of our internal mindset, mentality. And so because we don't see the interconnectivity, we think, oh, there must be a fix to this. There must be like a medication to this. I need something outside of myself in order to heal myself. When really a lot of times it's, the fucking idea of yourself that's the thing that's getting in the way, creating all of this friction between yourself and reality, and the conflict between yourself and reality. And it's like our health is kind of a expression of how much conflict we have with the reality that we're experiencing, the reality that we're, surrounded by, within, that we are. And so, yeah, I don't think enough people really take that into account. But then again, that's taking responsibility, right? If you're not willing to take responsibility, it's got to be something outside of you. It's like, oh, they're the reason I'm stressed. Oh, that's the reason I'm stressed. That's the reason I'm worked up. That's the reason my skin has bad health. Oh, it's genetics. I'm not saying that doesn't play a part. Don't crucify me for that. But there is a component of responsibility that. And even if, oh, that person's making me stressed, it's like, no, your response to that person is making you stressed. There's nothing about them that's inherently, you know, adding stress to you. You're letting it stick, you're taking it. And it's always that. No matter the situation, there's the potential. Someone could be experiencing an amazing thing in their life, but they expected it to be a little bit more amazing. And there's like a conflict there then with their expectation. And now they're stressed despite going through this. You see it on vacation all the time. People have these massive expectations. Then it's like an awesome vacation, but they thought it was going to be super awesome. And it's like we're doing all of these things to ourselves by making up these things like the way things should be. Like, oh, and we do it to ourselves too. Like, oh, I should be better at this by now. I should be doing this. Kind of like and I'm fucking hard on myself a lot of times, but it sounds funny even saying that I'm hard on myself. But with the retreats, it's like it's not always about, sometimes your role isn't to necessarily be relaxed. Sometimes it's like you got to go through shit, and you being relaxed you couldn't go through shit while you weren't caught up in yourself. And there's always things playing out accordingly, not according to plan, not according to some preconceived thing, but like they're playing out as they are. And it's just the varying degree of sensitivity, relaxation that's going to not necessarily make it better for anyone necessarily, because it's always just what it is for reality, but it's at least going to create a little bit less conflict for you as you go through it, if you're not making up this idea of like how you should be acting, how things should be going, where you should be at. And without that, then it's a lot easier to relax, and through that relaxation actually see reality for what it is, actually be sensitive to it, actually be involved in the situation, be the situation, and realizing that your mentality, what you're embodying, is the most impact you could ever possibly have on the situation at hand. It's not about the words. It's not about what you say. It's not about how you make people feel. It's you feeling how you're feeling. And then everything's expressed from that, from where you're at, from how much conflict or how little conflict you have with what's going on, with what you are, with what's happening right now.
It's funny because I say funny, but it's also a little twisted. It's not just that we pass off responsibility in terms of our stress to other people or circumstances or genetics or anything. We pass it off in terms of our victories. We pass it off in terms of the good shit too. This person makes me feel really good about myself. The weather has made me feel better. Oh, that just runs in our family. Shit like that. It's just like, no, it's still you doing it. Like, it's regardless if you feel good around a person, it's because you choose to react to that person that way. It's because you are choosing a mentality that can align with that person. It's still you. And it's really important to recognize that. But again, that just goes back to that irresponsibility, because there's no difference. You can still be responsible for your happiness and appreciate the influence that somebody's having in your life. But it's to recognize that you could shit all over that influence. You really could. Like, despite how nice a person might be, despite how sunny it might be out and how ideal the weather might be, you could still shit all over that experience. And if you're enjoying yourself, it's because you're allowing yourself to do so. Don't make the mistake of thinking that's the reason that you're doing so. You're the reason you're doing so. That's just the perk.
Yeah, that's a great point. It kind of reminds me of how I think a lot of people will start referring as they realize, like, oh, the story of me isn't me. They'll start referring, and I did this, oh, I don't know, a year ago, probably more frequently, but refer to yourself kind of in the third person, like refer to character as something separate. And it's not to say that, the character isn't you, but like you're always you. And the title, the name, whatever is kind of irrelevant. And this is what we've talked about a lot with the whole non-dual teacher crowd. Like, oh, there is no me. It's like, that's not that, it's just the idea of you, but you're still you. Like the you that is talking is you talking. It's just not all that you are. And I had someone comment, I gotta go check if they responded because it was a couple days ago and I forgot. It was just a random TikTok comment, but someone said something about like how, oh, well, there is no me or you at all. And it was like from the non-dual approach. And I forget exactly what else they added, but it was something along those lines of like, oh, there's no me or you. Things are just happening. It's like, okay, if there's no you, who's typing the words right now? And I haven't seen their response yet, but I get a better idea of
Words are
your
being typed,
responses.
Andrew. Words are being
Exactly.
typed
Words are
as they
being typed
talk
from
to you.
exactly by an energetic contraction interacting with another energetic contraction. It's like, okay, can we just call them names so we can differentiate them? And I'm starting to understand more because like when you would respond to people in that mentality of like, okay, then who am I talking to right now? And they would respond with just like an avoidance tactic. It's the avoidance because what they're missing there is that it's still them. Like there is still me. Like me is still me. It's just not all that I am. It's just not the extent of it. But at the same time, it is because there's nothing else. Like there's no separate thing. It's just, yeah, it gets funny because it's still, yeah, fuck. There's nothing separate. So it's not even that this isn't just all that I am. Like it is.
Before we go too far here, just because we have a lot of people who have joined us in this live stream, and I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who is here. We really appreciate it while you're here. If you would like to help us and the Dualistic Unity podcast, we are actually in the 2023 People's Choice Podcast Awards this year. We were in the awards last year. We made the semifinals for the religion and spirituality category. This year, it's religion and spirituality, society, and the People's Choice category. All you have to do is go to podcastawards.com. Registration takes 2 minutes, and then you can just vote for us in those 3 categories, and you can vote for other podcasts in other categories. But we really appreciate it if you could do that. It helps us out. We don't really care if we win, but it does expose a lot of people to the fact that we exist. And that increases the conversation and the size of our community. And I just want to say that quickly. The QR code is on the screen. Again, podcastawards.com. That all said, I don't think it's that the non-duality crowd misses it. I think it's that they don't want to see it. I think that they cannot differentiate between their idea of themselves and the experience of themselves. And since the idea of themselves is the source of their suffering and their pain, and the reason that they cling so hard to this, let's say, philosophical numbness, that they just can't recognize the idea of themselves isn't who they are. And so they just avoid the whole thing. No, I don't exist. Because if I admit I exist, I'm immediately in the quagmire of what I think that means, rather than recognizing that's the thing. It's not what you think it means. It's what is. It's what is thinking.
Yeah, it's almost a numbing tactic, kind of similar to SSRIs, right? Just from a from a different point of view. It's like a philosophical SSRI, that mentality, because it's just instead of being willing to let go of the conceptual idea and still be them, it's like they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And I don't want any degree of experience. So I'm just going to convince myself that I'm not having an experience right now, that I'm just, energy, whatever, which like isn't wrong in that sense, but it's like a complete avoidance of being it. Yeah. And so anyway, but that, the recognition, and I see this in your comments when you respond to people, just in regards to this, is like, you're not what you think, and what's left is everything. Like, that's kind of it right there. It's just the conceptual. When the conceptual idea isn't there, or at least isn't taken as seriously, or isn't invested in as seriously, at least I find myself kind of running to another conceptual idea. And it's like, we expand the conceptual idea, but it can still be maintained as a conceptual idea until it's like, yeah, you're never what you think. You're never what you think. Like, oh yeah, but so I'm everything. And it's like, yeah, it's not really that either, because that's still, it's just what's left. And we can't, it's hard to wrap our heads around that. It's almost arguably impossible to do so. And so as we try to, as I try to, it's you butt up against that reality of what it is. But it's like seeing it, the actual practice of it is just blowing my mind. It's been so gnarly the last couple days of just like, holy fuck, me doing it is me doing it. Like, that's it. There's no one I have to convince of anything ever. Like, I don't, it's like, oh, it's almost similar to the feeling of when I first realized, like, oh, the story of Andrew isn't what I am. And I felt like I was walking like 6 inches off the ground for a little while and was just high all the time. I wasn't smoking as much weed back then, but it's kind of similar to that, like a weight that I was like, oh, there's someone else to convince. How do I make this clearer? How do I get this? How do I make this so succinct and perfect that someone will just get it as soon as I say the words. And it's like, oh, the prioritization of just relaxing myself and being that has been unbelievable. Like, it's crazy that we've talked for this long and I haven't, but at the same time, it's like, that was all informing this anyway. It was all a component of this, and you can't realize that without any of the other shit. So it's like irrelevant to think about what was or anything like that. But anyway, it's been,
Yeah. I just want to mention very quickly that I am always growing and evolving throughout these conversations. The only thing that has changed over time is that I never make the mistake of thinking that I'm anywhere near the end now. Each and every time, like every time I have an insight, I'm like, huh, I wonder where that's going to lead. It's no longer, like, oh my God, I'm seeing it, because I've laughed at how often I've said that in my life. Like, oh my God, I've never seen it this clearly. Oh my God, I've never seen it this clearly. And after a while, you're just like, I get it. I get it. There's always more to see. Right. And so I think that's really important to just keep that in mind. Like, you're going to continue to unfold new insights if you're willing to look. If you're willing to look, that's really all it is. And most people look to a point where all of a sudden the suffering has stopped a little. And they're like, I'm good now. And then it starts to creep back in, because the suffering comes with the stagnation, and the stagnation comes with the identity, and the identity comes with the fear and all of that fun stuff. And so if you're not letting go, then unfortunately things usually start to grind against you, and that alignment starts to get lost.
yeah, that's been definitely like, as much as I am feeling just relaxed right now, I know without a shadow of a doubt that there's going to be fucking some hard dips coming up, but it's not a thought of that. It's just a recognition of the flow of things, and that there's going to be, and again, it's like that Bruce Lee quote, like, don't pray for an easy life, pray for the strength to handle a tough one. Like there's a continual shift in my mentality of going into things. The more shit I go through, the more I realize like, oh, it's not that either. Like, oh, is this it? It's like, no, it's not that either, fucker. Like and the points from like, oh, maybe this is it, have pretty much, I don't know, gone away. I really don't do that as much anymore. I did that like fucking 5 years ago when I came across gratitude. I was like, gratitude, that's I just gotta be grateful. That's it. And it's amazing. And it's like, granted, obviously that comes from a lot of my background with having a relatively comfortable life that I would even think that that's like it. But it was like, I remember very, very clearly thinking like, oh, that's all, because there was a shift there, and it was like, oh, I never realized that, you know, things aren't as bad as the whole fucking story I'm holding on to inside of my head. So there's shifts, but it's like the more shifts you go through, the less you're like, oh, I've gotten it. It's this recognition that I now understand, and this is it. It's like, because who's getting it? Like, who's getting it? Exactly. If not all of you, everything that you are, getting it as you, thinking that you're separately getting it more than what? More other you? Like, there's no other, there's no comparison in that, but it's interesting how the comparison can come up so quickly, so quickly. It's like such a deeply ingrained sort of feeling of like, oh, if I can compare, then I can know what I am. I can know where I'm at. And it's always a double-edged sword, of course, because you fall below or you fall above, and then your feelings come with that. The extremes of the emotions come with just that, like how you measure up relative to, quote unquote, someone else, or an idea of yourself, which is also equally as much someone else as the reality of what you are. And then it's compared to a made up fucking expectation bar that you're keeping in yourself, because it's a comparison to a conceptual idea. So you're always comparing the reality of you, which is which is what's happening, which is what is, to a made up conceptual idea, be it of yourself or a made up conceptual idea of someone else, and that how they fit. And then comes the entirety of the spectrum from like the conceptual emotional standpoint. There's still an experience of the spectrum, but it differs a lot when it's not in that comparative mindset.
Yeah. It dawns on me as we're going through this that, and I know we've said this a number of different ways, but we tend to get confused in that we think that our interpretation of our experience is the experience. And then we never get out of that. And we don't recognize that our interpretation of the experience is only one of many. And it's all, depending on your point of view, depending on how much you want to zoom out, depending on not just that, your emotional framework, state of mind, all of that other stuff. But it's kind of like we were talking about, and I don't remember which of the episodes, might have been cycles within cycles. I don't know. If I were to drop a ball from 2 feet off the ground, how far has that ball moved? Well, you can go, well, it's moved 2 feet from where you dropped it to the ground. It's like, right, relative to what? Relative to the planet? Relative to how fast the planet has spun while that ball has dropped? Because that's also distance, technically. It's moved throughout space, that amount of distance. The planet's just carried it there, right? Relative to the sun, because now the planet's moving around the sun. So the ball's actually moved like several thousand meters in the second that it took for it to drop those 2 feet. So did it drop 2 feet or did it move thousands of meters? And both interpretations are correct based on where you're standing, based on your perspective. And so it really is that our interpretation of the experience is not the experience. And what the experience is us. That's what we are. That's why every time we're like, I get it. What? The thing you've been this whole time? The thing you'll always be? How can you get something you can't lose? Right? And it's just because we get tripped up on the conceptualism. We really want it to be an idea instead of just what we are.
Yeah, and that goes for balance too, right? And staying on the ball, like the idea that you can be off balance, you can feel like you're off balance, you can perceive yourself as being off balance while never losing balance just because of a conceptual mental story that you're telling yourself. And we actually talked about that I don't know, on an episode a while ago, just about how that, like, you can't fall, you're walking on a tightrope that you can't fall off of, but you just keep perceiving, you know, a falling off, or thinking that you've fallen off despite not doing so. So it's always the case that we're always fucking going through things perfectly, not well or poorly, but just you're going through it as you're going through it. Like it's what's happening. You are the tightrope, the walker, all of it. So you can't fall off because there's nothing else. There's nothing to fall off of. There's nothing to fall off into. There's nothing to fall down to. There's no space in between what you would be doing and what you would be falling off of. That is entirely based in conceptual ideas that you could even be quote unquote off track. It's like you're off track relative to a track that you made up and are maintaining, and now you're off track relative to the track that you made up and are maintaining. So it's like, what's actually happening? You are the track happening. You are it happening. You're just like, there's nothing else to be happening. And it's like that. We were talking about this on Patreon because of our investment in experience, our ability to perceive a division. There's a degree of investment in that to a sense, but like, and I don't know, this is something I've been kind of thinking about because I think of it as like, oh, the degree of investment, like 1% investment in a conceptual idea, but that's still conceptual. So like part of me wants to measure that, like how invested am I back and forth? And there's no like actual percentage points that are happening. It's just in my head. But in regards to that, like in order to have experience, there has to it's like there has to be a degree of investment. But what the fuck does that even mean? And does there? Like, does there have to be a degree of investment? Is that only a conceptual investment that doesn't have to be?
Experience itself is investment.
Yeah. Okay. And so is that
And no, it's
that
not optional.
yeah. I'm not saying it's optional. I'm saying like, is that the same? I'm like, I don't know if I'm digging into this too much, but like experience being necessary, like there has to be investment for experience, but then in perception of myself being separate, like is that in the same bucket, or is that like, just a drop for experience, and then it's like how full are you making this other bucket where all of your psychological shit conflict comes from? Like there is no conflict without I, but like is it investment in I? Like I is necessary for experience, and so it's just degree of investment in being just my idea of I.
I would say that that's the large part of it, yeah, but the question is how much of your idea of is influencing your physical experience as well? I mean, we talk about this in terms of relationships, and that would be the easiest way, right? Like, the more you get out of your own way, the easier relationships tend to get. Well, why is that? Well, because you're not putting so much of a conceptual barrier between yourself and someone else. You're not putting so much of a division. You're just acting unified. You're embodying the state of unification that is just exists without you trying to get anywhere, right? Well, okay. So if we know we have an impact over reality that way, if that's something we can actually demonstrate and see, then who's to say that we don't impact reality in other ways? And if we do impact realities in other ways, if our thoughts do in fact have a measurable field around us, as many people are saying, right, then how much is that influenced by our perception that we are in fact separate from that reality? How much of that field is really just a contained field because we hold on to this very small idea of ourselves separate from everything else? And if that's the case, then that's a whole unexplored conversation, which is the reason that we're in the Global Consciousness Project. It's the reason Dualistic Unity is a part of the Global Consciousness Project, is because they are measuring whether or not, or attempting to measure whether or not there is an observable effect of our awareness upon reality in terms of random number generation. Because that would be just one indication. Then we can look further in that direction. But the question is, how much is your physical affected by your perspective of division? Is that more or less where you're getting? I don't know. I'm very curious. And what's interesting is that I spent so long exploring that on my own that I came to this point that I recognize you can't get there by trying. If there is a possibility in that, it cannot be accomplished by being an accomplishment. It has to be the result of letting go, in which case it can't be researched. And nothing in our society is able to actually go in that direction because of the very mentality that it's based upon. So what's interesting there is that, so I'm like, okay, so I'll just let go. And as I did so, more and more of me started to show up. And now in these retreats, in these groups, I experience more insight and more of a rate of change all the time based on more exposure to myself, and more of myself in a vulnerable state, more of myself in the very mentality that I would need to explore the question that you're asking. And so all of us are driving towards that question in one way or another, so long as we're willing to let go. But to answer your question, and I love my answer here, I don't know.
I'm excited to continue to explore it for sure. But it's even that, like, even in my question, there's this assumption that I'm not already what is. I'm not already everything happening. And like obviously that is a conceptual idea you can get very tripped up on. But it's
Okay,
it's like
I got something. So let's just say that you are everything happening all the time. This does not discount the experience that you are currently having of duality. And in that experience of duality, there are a number of things at play. There's the individual experience, which is the pendulum swing back and forth within larger pendulum swings, back and forth within larger pendulum swings, back and forth. And then there's the experience of the character, the individual within the collective, which is also doing large pendulum swings back and forth in a direction, apparently. How much of that direction is swayed by our responsibility as the whole, or our lack of responsibility of the whole as the whole? Right? And so there's a question there. Like, yeah, okay, we are the all of everything, but we have the experience of duality, which means the experience of direction. We can make this heaven or hell, right? But that's part of the beauty of this dualistic experience, is that we can go in a direction. We're always the all of everything. There's nowhere to get, but the direction establishes the experience that we're having.
that's a really good point because I think sometimes I'll get caught in thinking that the experience of duality e- isn't equated to the experience of unity. Like the experience of duality is a component, and not even a component, like is the experience of unity. Like this is the
Well said.
experience. Yeah. Like it's not it's not like unity and then experience of duality in this tiny little pocket.
Because you can't experience unity. Unity isn't an experience because there's no experiencer versus the experienced. The duality of it is gone. This is the only way to experience unity.
Ah, shit. I don't think I've. Oh. Oh, man. I have not realized that. This is the only way to experience. You can't experience unity without a perception of division. It doesn't change the fact that it's unity, but you can't experience unity without a perception of duality. Fuck. Okay. All right.
There's the
Wow.
cosmic joke. Like I said, it's funny when you get it, right? You're just like, oh my God, this is a gift. This is incredible, right? And that's it. It is. It's a gift. It's incredible. It's not even a gift because it's self bestowed, right? But it comes down to what you do with it here and now. Is it a gift or a curse? And most of us spend so much time perceiving division and believing it to be the case that we have no choice but to feel like a victim.
Yeah, and there's still like a willingness because even despite duality being the only way to experience unity, it doesn't change the reality of what's happening. And it's like, how invested are you in not being that? It's not an investment in being that. It's just how much you're keeping it at bay. It's like the negative investment in a sense. It's not this active, like, I'm now being everything. It's just, I'm, it's like we're holding on to, I'm definitely not everything, as opposed to, I don't know what I am. I don't know. And that's just it. It's the not knowing. It's the not settling on an answer that allow. And of course, we've talked about that plenty of times. It's the not. We don't have answers. I don't have answers because there aren't any. It's that's not what this is. That implies, even an answer implies a division, a reality of division. And so we can come up with answers. We can have questions and come up with answers, but it's not that it can ever be an answer, because that implies a division that doesn't exist. And so recognizing that, you can play with it as the experience of what is, as the experience of unity, but you can't adequately express what is through any degree of saying anything. And so, and that just brings me back even more to, like, it's just got to be me doing it. Like, there's no one else to convince. The answer isn't convincing everyone else. The answer is not an answer besides just recognition and, like, not keeping the reality at bay, despite recognizing that it's not something separate from this. Like, this is the experience of unity right now. It's not within, it's not separate, it's not happening as a thing that's at all separate. It's like, you can't experience unity without duality. It's
But how much changes knowing that? And that's really it. Like, there's nothing to do. What a wonderful thing to share with myself. And that's it. Is that you're just, that is the change. Is accepting that you are, accepting that you're a change, and just going with it, making the most of it, right? Letting go of all that fear and division and everything else. It's interesting because we see it like in religion. God is Yahweh, the ineffable, the Tao that can't be told, right? All that stuff. But we're just left with that. We're just left with those kind of, like, I don't know, cryptic clues. And we're like, what the fuck does that mean? And it's because we lost the conversation that led to them. We lost the ability to actually look at the insight, and not just like catch it in passing and then talk about it for generations, but actually like look at it and go, huh, look at that. It's fucking obvious. Right. And that's the thing, is that's why I didn't run off to the forest, because I could know this and be perfectly fine with the rest of my existence, or I could be here sharing it with the rest of my existence. And that's why I'm here.
yeah, and that's what I'm realizing even more is, it's not even about, because even being in the forest versus not, it doesn't change what you do. It's not like you come out of the forest and now it's like, oh, gotta talk to more people and gotta make sure I'm saying the right stuff and getting people at all. No, it's the same. You're the same. You're just putting yourself in spots where there's more potential for a ripple, or there's more potential for more ripples, or
There was some self-honesty involved with this too, admittedly. And it comes down to, why am I avoiding people? Why am I avoiding people? Why am I trying to run from society, other than some, concept, some idea of where it's all going, of what's going to happen to the world, of what people are really all about, blah, 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 blah. Right. And this is it. It's like, it's almost easier to believe that we're going on the road to apocalypse than to actually do something about it. Right. And so part of it was the fact that I had something to face in myself, which was my aversion to myself in my egotistical form, myself caught up in the idea of division. And that's not how that changes. That's the very thing that perpetuates that whole thing is the aversion to it, which is why I've always said it does no good to be in a monastery on a mountaintop. It's almost cowardly.
Yeah, it's interesting. Oh fuck, I was gonna write it down. I was like, no, I'll remember. Whatever. But yeah, it doesn't have the impact necessarily to be in and uh, yeah, I guess it just comes down to self-honesty is kind of the main thing, right? Because it's not that, yeah. So you making that decision was just there's something like, what am I avoiding? It's not necessarily that it's better to be around more of you than not. It's not that at all. It's just there's an opportunity here. There's no right or wrong thing. Like I think I can get caught sometimes thinking that it's better to be involved in society than to not. And it's like, no, it's just an option because you don't change. You're just it's like how much of that are you avoiding? As you said, it's just you're avoiding some conceptual idea. And oh, that's what I was going to say was in regards to society, like it's so much easier to look at it and be like, oh, we're doomed. Everything's fucked. Everything's falling apart. It's like, and then there's the side that's like, oh, it's like people are complaining it's not that bad. And it's like, well, it's kind of a burning dumpster fire, but it doesn't mean that you can't look at that and not see, oh, yeah, everything seems fucked right now, but that doesn't mean that that's the answer. Like, it doesn't mean that that's it. It doesn't mean that it's in finality because there isn't like we have such short-term viewpoints on things. And it's like obviously you start expanding it, expand yourself, you recognize you're not, you're not dying in the next 100 years. The reality of you, then things shift, but then it's also that being willing to look at it and do something about it, but also not do something that has impact, like not doing something that you can measure and be like, let me do this specifically so I can feel better. I'm gonna do this specific thing because this is gonna have this specific impact, and I'm doing it to save the world as opposed to myself. And so in saving yourself, like the reality of you is just being it yourself. And that's the mentality shift. Fuck, we've been talking about the mentality shift for years, and I'm just realizing that it's my mentality shift. It's not a collective mentality shift. It's not someone else's mentality shift. It's fucking my mentality shift. And that's it. Like we're shifting a mentality. It's like we're shifting my mentality. I'm even hesitant to say shifting your mentality. It's like shifting my mentality. That's
Same
it.
thing.
Exactly. Because and it's not something like I'm not doing this to shift anyone else's mentality. I'm doing this as an expression of my mentality shifting. And I've always been doing that despite not not realizing it in the way that I'm doing it now. Like the whole fucking time we've been talking, it's been an expression of my mentality, quote unquote, our mentality. But that's all it's been. And I've thought that I was telling someone something. I thought I was talking to someone else. It's just been a deepening in myself of realizing that it's just like this isn't and fuck, like I've even said it, like this is just a conversation. This is just something. It's like in the back of my head, I was like, yeah, it's just a conversation, but we're giving tips, we're giving advice, we're helping people. It's like it's not even it's just an expression of being more and more relaxed. Because it's not to say, and I know I was saying before I'm hard on myself, like I feel like this is the first time I've had any and I know I'm not even as deeply relaxed as I probably will be at another point, whatever. I'm not gonna get into catching myself on
That's
that,
a
but
story too.
exactly. Like, exactly, and it's always it's been a progression, but it also hasn't, and yeah, like, you feel certain shifts more than others, but it's not to say that there's not an infinite number of shifts happening right now, that you're feeling some more than others. Maybe you're pointing to certain ones, but it's like
When
there
are
are
you not everything?
infinite shifts on infinite scales at all times. And yeah.
See, it's a good name for our podcast, eh? It's funny how that worked out. I want to mention very quickly because we have about, I don't know, 25 minutes left of this episode. If you would like to join us after this on a group Zoom, we would love to chat with you. You can join us on on patreon.com/dualistic unity. We do this 5 days a week. Our community is our strength because, frankly, our community is us. The community is formed because people are focused on themselves and their own journey and letting go of the perspective of others and the perspective of division. And so everybody who does that, everyone who does that, wants a place to express that, is looking for a way to be in an environment where they can be vulnerable, where they can try things out, maybe push themselves in a way that they didn't feel comfortable before because everybody around them is judging them on who they used to be. So to have people who aren't measuring you up to an idea, people who are in fact looking to let go of their idea of themselves and thus you, gives you an environment where you can actually just hang out and practice all of the changes that you're working on the rest of the time that maybe you don't see so much. So if you can't join us at a retreat, definitely join us on Patreon. We do 5 days a week of groups. There's a 7-day free trial that's available. Take advantage of it. I mean, you can join for a week. Not only that, but you get access to a lot of video that does not ever see the public or the light of day. There's group Zooms on there from the very second month of our podcast. So we've been doing this for a long time. You can see some of the conversations that have informed the insights that have informed our episodes, including this conversation. Because it's important to remember that, and I've said this from the beginning, working on yourself helps me because we're all working on the same self. It's just not the self we think that we're working on, right? And that's the funny part about it. Change is constant. It's just direction that we have a sway over.
Yeah. I have something else, but yeah, Patreon is it's a gold mine there. It's a blast. We have so much fun on those calls, and it's got a different, it's much more people sharing things, people going through stuff, having fun talking about random fucking funny shit sometimes, and half of everyone's usually baked on the calls, so that's always a great time. And yeah, besides the calls, it's like the calls are massive and they're a ton of fun, but there's like 30, 40 other things that are perks to being on our Patreon. So definitely, if you haven't checked that out, at least check it out for a week, and you can do that for free. And yeah, they're a lot of fun. But in regards to that, like even with, and I'm still kind of thinking a little bit about that 5 edible day that I had the other day, that was like very, very deep feeling trip, like deeper than any mushroom trip I've had before in terms of like feeling everything. And I recorded a bunch of videos because I was running, and it will be posted as a run at some point. But I filmed a number afterwards as I was like, I stopped running because I'm like, I can't run anymore. I was barely moving, and I just walked, and then I just recorded a lot of what I was feeling and thinking, and just the things that I was feeling. And I got to go back to those because I haven't looked at them since. But that feeling of being everything, like the depth of the recognition, not that you're holding on to any idea, but just that there's no idea of you there. And so it just becomes more and more obvious. And so in that spot, like that you're never not in, like just recognizing it and then being willing to relax despite all of the feelings that you're feeling. Because when you're feeling that, it's feeling a lot, because everything isn't just bliss, it's everything. It's like just a lot of feeling, and until you attach an idea of what you think it is just feeling. But when you're feeling that and then you relax, like, do you think that ripples deepen? But then what the fuck does that even mean? Ripples deepening, right? Like, it's like I wanna be willing to say, like, all right, so if I recognize that I'm
Still kind of holding
75.
on to others, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, if I recognize that I'm 75% of everything, then will my ripple be like 75 feet deep? Or like, it's I wanna measure it, but it's still something else, like having impact.
Something else. It's something else. You always have impact. That's the thing, is that you're already doing whatever it is you think you're trying to do, is that you're already doing it, which means it's just sensitivity for what that is, which is not conceptual, which is why, again, the practice of letting go and listening and feeling and being and actually being in that space before the fucking thought. And that's the lesson that goes beyond the conversation. That's the part that we can't we can't share on a podcast.
Yeah, and it's that I guess I feel like I'm feeling a little bit more just from letting go of my desire to convince someone else. Like, that's been a big one for a while, that desire to get someone else to feel a little bit better, to feel a little bit more free, to understand it a little bit more. Like, that's been I don't think I even realized it until I realized that there's no one else to try to convince, because as soon as I do, I'm stressed. Like, that's been on my mind in most interactions that I have, was and to varying degrees though. Like, some interactions, like, I really want someone to fucking quote unquote get it. And then some I'm just like I was more relaxed in it, that I wasn't trying to say anything, but there was still like this undertone of saying something, because and then immediately there's saying something correctly versus incorrectly, saying something that has more versus less impact. There's immediately the dichotomy, there's immediately the spectrum, and there's immediately stress, tension, different feelings of adequacy versus inadequacy that come as soon as you try. Like, as soon as you try to do something, as soon as you try to do something, there's the opportunity of coming up short. It's the opportunity to fail. There's the opportunity to do it correctly versus incorrectly, to succeed versus fail. And because I've always thought that I have to try in order to do, there's always been the, am I doing well or poorly? There's always been the constant measurement, as long as you're trying to do something, which it's not to say that literally every interaction I've had for my entire life, I've been trying to do something, but it's most of them. It's almost all of them. It's a lot. And there's the fucking measurement that comes with it immediately as soon as you try. As soon as you try.
See why I'm so excited about this? Everything that's been happening in terms of the growth of the conversation, because it really is a result of me just not trying, right? And telling you every step along the way, let's just talk, right? And that has been, the point. And if you weren't willing to do that, if you weren't willing to just talk, then there's no way that you would have come as far as you have. And isn't that the fun part of this paradox, is that you make more progress by letting go of the journey than you do in focusing on the journey? Because the journey is the concept. The journey is not reality. The journey is a part of your interpretation of the experience rather than the experience itself. All you can do is walk. Fuck the path. It's defined by you.
And that, as much as that can be tough for someone who really wants there to be a journey, like, it's the most freeing thing you can realize, is that you are the path. Each step you make is the path happening. You can't fall off balance. You can't do something wrong, but you can't also do something right, because everything you do is what is. It's not about right or wrong. It's like we exist in this spectrum of good versus bad, right versus wrong, thinking that that's the answer. Like everything has to be judged. Just, oh my God, it's like everything has to be judged so I can fit myself into something. So I can have a relative perception of myself versus everything has to be judged so that I can know where I fit. Oh, that's a bad thing. And I don't do it. So therefore I'm good. Oh, that's a really good thing. And I want to do that, but I don't yet. So I don't feel good about myself now, but I will when I get there. It's like all this that's a bad thing. Oh, I did that. I feel shame. I feel guilt. I feel bad. Oh, it's a good thing. Oh, I'm doing it. Oh yeah. I feel I feel amazing. And we just fucking bounce. We just bounce back and forth like a fucking pong ball. Just feel good, feel bad, feel good, feel bad, feel good, feel bad. Measure my progress. How am I doing? Measure my progress. How am I doing? Feel good, feel bad, feel good. It's like, holy fuck. Oh my God. Like it's and there's like it's not to say that there aren't temporary cessations of the lack of judgment, but as long as it's like when you're not thinking, that's allowed to happen, because you can't have both. You can't be measuring yourself and not thinking. And so as you let go of the idea that you can possibly measure yourself, as you see yourself as something relative, as you see that, oh, maintaining this conceptual idea through my judgments, through my opinions taken as truth, maybe it's not the best thing for me to do. Maybe it's actually quite all right to not hold on to that. And it's like I don't want to give up the egotistical high of feeling good and like setting the good bar and then reaching it, because that feels so great despite inevitably tumbling into that. But and this is what we were saying yesterday is like even with the quote unquote good bar, like people will say like, oh, well, why can't you just always think good thoughts, always think positively? And it's like that's still a wall, that's still tension, that's still relative perception. And that it's like that relative perception, kind of like the example I've said a number of times with the feeling of freedom versus tension, where I'm walking my dog and she's like tense on the leash. And so I can have an idea of where she is. If she's behind me and going slow up a hill or something, I can feel and I could, without looking, point to exactly where she is. When she isn't tugging on it because she's just walking next to me, there's some slack on the leash. It's like I don't have an idea of where she is. And so sometimes if I'm not paying super close attention, I can like, oh shit, did she run away? And then I'm like, oh no, she's right next to me. And that's good. And so with the idea of good and the idea of meeting that, it's like there's always a tension between, it's like the carrot and stick mentality is tension between the goal and the fear of what we're running from. And it's like we're always sliding back and forth. And we get a temporary cessation of the tension, maybe if we reach that spot. But it's so temporary that immediately, say we set a goal of you know, doing a certain thing. We want to make $100,000 in a month. And so you do that. And though, so the moment it happens, the moment you realize it, it's like you met it and the tension isn't there as much. And so you can relax for a second. But then immediately, you look at someone else and you're like, oh fuck, they made $200,000. I gotta do that. Immediate back in tension. And like we're just on a sliding scale of tension measuring ourselves. And so it's not even the positive side is not this like, oh, well, if you can just maintain the positive side for your whole life, then you'll be good. It's like, holy fuck, that's always, there's always going to be tension. Like the discussion of relaxation, the discussion of being what you are, of freedom, can't be simultaneously attached to, that spectrum of tension of carrot and stick, of good and bad. And so as you start to realize that more, then the thoughts that are constantly measuring that progress, you start to take a little bit less seriously, and then they inform each other. And you can feel a little bit more relaxed because you know that there's no way to adequately measure.
Takes a lot of the pressure off, right?
So
recognizing that you're always just putting it on yourself, right? And at the end of the day, it's because you want to avoid what? What? You know, the fact that the most you can do is what you're doing right now. That in fact, the best thing that you can do about what you're doing right now is to pay attention to it without judgment, because the judgment just distracts you from what you're doing. And so, really, the answer is just relax, do, right? Have faith in yourself. And as soon as I say any of that, the point is lost. And that's why this is so difficult. But that's why this conversation is ongoing, and it always will be, right? Because we can beat around the burning bush all fucking day until we accept that it's us. That's all it is. You know, I find it funny. I was saying this to you the other day. I thought it was an interesting line that popped across my awareness that we are as far from being what we think we are as God is from being human. And I find that really funny and kind of tongue in cheek, because that's exactly it. That we are everything, thinking that we're just one thing at any given point, when we don't recognize that everything and they're not exclusive. Right? They can be the same thing. It's just our lack of imagination that stops it from being so.
and that's just it. It's the story we maintain that keeps all of that at bay. And so with it's still, yeah, it's kind of irrelevant. It's like I'm catching myself so quick with the, the impacts or the, oh fuck. It's still like anytime I want to be like, okay, but so like recognizing what? It's like how does that impact the impacts? It's like impact what fucking impacts? Like impact implies two. Like, so you can't even have an impact on something separate from you. So you're always you. You might as well be you. Like, fully and wholeheartedly be you is the best thing you can ever do for you. Like anything else is getting in the way. Anything else is taking you or perceiving, like, allows you to perceive yourself from being taken from it. But again, it's like you can't experience unity without duality, and so that comes with it. It's like the potential to get so lost, take it so seriously that you fully and wholeheartedly believe that it's what you are, despite never having been. Actually, but then fully having the experience of it. So it's not even a never having been, because you've always been it. Like, this is you being it. Like, this is not some fucking thing where we come with a soul contract from another planet or galaxy. It's like you're it, right? You are unity. You are all of it. You are everything right now. Perceiving a division.
Nowhere to go.
Nowhere to go. No one to convince. Nothing to get across.
Are you telling me that Earth isn't one of the most difficult schools in the universe, and that humans are super special for being? You're telling me none of that narrative is true, but it makes me feel so good. It's like stroking my ego, you know?
Oh, so good. It's like, oh, that's quite the story you got there. And that's every time someone's like, whoa,
And so limited.
oh my God, incredibly. It's like, it's so fucking tiny. I mean, any idea is incredibly fucking limited. Even a, quote unquote big idea is very limited relative to fucking infinity. Like, everything is. And it's interesting how we can get so tied to conceptual ideas, like so tied to the story. It's like, oh, that story sounds nice because we think everything's a fucking story. Like, but that's
But
all they are.
but we want them to be. We want it to be complicated. I mean, it's so funny because we have we have all these rules. Like, okay, so in Christianity, you have like the 10 Commandments, and you've got, like, you got to be a good person, love your community, do all that fun stuff. And then there's God, right? So it's almost like there's two different conversations happening. It's like there's God and there's the shit that God tells you to do. Whereas in this conversation, it's relax. And all there is different scales of relaxation. It's really all it is. It's the same lesson over and over again, regardless. Regardless, if you are having a mental health crisis as an individual working in the world, no perspective of divinity or the universe or anything whatsoever, you could be fucking a devout atheist. Relax, pay attention, be yourself are still the three best fucking things you're ever going to hear. And you carry those further. They start leading you towards more insights about how you and other people aren't as different as you might think. How you might be not as limited by, the stories that you tell yourself, that maybe your doubts aren't the truth because you started to relax a little enough to question those things. And that leads you to questioning other things. And that leads you to questioning other things. And it's one fucking direction. And it's just surrender. That's all it is. And that's why this is so beautiful, because there is no belief to have. There is just an ever deepening sense of yourself to let go and accept and be part of and experience. That's it. So this is why I love this entire podcast experience for me, for my experience, because this has just been fun and continues to be fun. And if it ever got serious, I would probably be concerned and I would do something weird just to make it fun again.
Likewise. Yeah. It's about to get a lot more fun. I think, at least from my perspective, like, holy fuck, finally relaxing. But that's just, and it's like, it really is just that, like, relaxation. And with those three, like, relax, pay attention, be yourself, I never got, I think it's funny how, like, I'll go through different periods where one is like my keyword of the insights that I'm getting, and for a while it was pay attention. Like, it was pay attention to what's happening, but it wasn't relax. It was almost like pay attention so you know the right thing to say in order to get the right thing across, and you're attentive so that the right thing can come out. But and when they all sort of come together, it's like there aren't. And I feel like now it's relax, but relax and be yourself kind of go hand in hand, and they all go hand in hand, but at least there's and different things will feel more applicable despite them all kind of coalescing together, because then relaxing plus paying attention is like, then and being yourself, which is like not
Can you
trying to
pay
be.
attention if you're not relaxed? Or are you just paying attention what you think you should be paying attention to?
Yeah, I was gonna say that. I was like, not actually, really. You can pay attention to what you think is the right thing to pay attention to, because you think there's a right thing and you're tense, and so there must be a right thing. Because then, if you do the right thing, you might be
And
able to
can you
relax.
relax if you're not being yourself? Because you're trying to be something. There's that pressure. They all mean the same thing. They all mean the same thing. We're always talking about the same goddamn thing, whether it's God or presence or love or empathy. Doesn't matter. Unity, source. They're all fucking words and they're all describing the same goddamn thing. I just happen to like relax because it's pretty on the nose.
Yeah, definitely so. And it's not just physical. It's not just physical relaxation. Oh
This
man.
has been an awesome raw. Everyone, we are going to continue in 15 minutes on Patreon, patreon.com/dualistic unity. You can find us there 5 days a week. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm looking forward to recording an episode later on this afternoon. We have an awesome guest in mind from the community. She knows who I'm talking about because she's in the community. She's in the audience right now. We'll see you soon. Andrew, thanks, man.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Talk to you later.